concurrent session number 6, performance-based earthquake engineering to promote discounts for single-family dwellings. I'm Jim Malley, one of the moderators for the session, along with my colleague Janiele Maffei. Professor Mosallam asked me to organize a session for the meeting this year, specifically to try and get a session that talked about how industry and practice is integrating with peer. And as I looked through all the work that's going on, this became clearly the topic that I thought would be best. And I was lucky enough to be able to call Janiele Maffei, who's sort of the sponsor of the whole program. And so I've got the easiest job here today, because all I have to do is turn it over to Janiele and the experts that she's working on to tell you about the CEA program. So Janiele.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much. So, and I have an easy job as well, because I haven't done any of this work. I just am the person behind the scenes thanking everybody for being so bright and talented. So 25 years ago, I was at Heavenly Valley with my family, and I looked at the screen and I saw the pictures of the devastation, and I said, I have a feeling that my life is going to change, and it very definitely did. I was working for Degenkolb at the time with Jim, and spent the next 18 months down in Los Angeles at least once a week, looking at some commercial buildings, but predominantly at single-family dwellings. And the best thing about it is our client asked us to look, as an insurance company, asked us to look at buildings just if the owner wanted us to. So I saw the spectrum of, little or no damage to seriously damaged, and it put me everywhere in the affected area. So it was just a lifelong learning experience. And so when the CEA job came up, I thought, this is exactly what I would like to do. So I go from a technical to a glossy picture, because this is now my job, is to try and explain engineering to lay people, to try and encourage them to join with me and my organization and the bright people that I work with to make California more resilient for earthquakes. And so it could happen today. I work for the California Earthquake Authority, and you may have seen our commercials. I have mixed reviews from my colleagues. Some say that it's using fear tactics. We very carefully test our commercials. The idea here is, how do you balance waking people up, educating them without frightening them? And so the exciting thing about what we're working on in mitigation is that we're bringing solutions. So who are we? The California Earthquake Authority, or CEA, is a not-for-profit residential earthquake insurance company. So not-for-profit, very important. We don't have shareholders. And to understand how we were created, you have to go back to 1984, when the state of California passed a law stating that if you write an insurance policy in California for a home, you must offer earthquake insurance. The homeowner is not obligated to buy it, but it must be offered, that mandatory offer law. So we have, I think, about 30% of the population is insured, and along comes the Northridge earthquake. There was not the sophisticated modeling of portfolios that we have today, and insurance companies lost their shirts, and they wanted none of it, and they were going to leave the state. If they had to write earthquake insurance, they didn't want any part of it. $40 billion in today's dollars of damage, half of that residential and half of that insured. And that $10 billion created a catastrophe in the insurance market, and as I said, they were going to leave the state. So the state of California created this publicly managed, privately financed instrumentality of the state. We report to 3 elected officials: the governor, the insurance commissioner, and the treasurer. And we have over 1 million policyholders now. We have a mission to educate, mitigate, and insure, with the mitigation portion being the department I work for. It was part of our mission from the very beginning to include mitigation, the idea to reduce damage, not just to transfer risk, which is what insurance is. And so a loss mitigation fund was set up at the very beginning and has been funded by 5% of investment income of this organization since 1996. We work through our participating insurers. You don't buy a CEA insurance policy for your home through us, but rather through your insurance company. And we have tremendous financial strength. We have just under $17 billion in payout capacity. On the right, you see here that what this repeat of this earthquake in the same location would mean to us. Loma Prieta would barely be a blip. Northridge, we could do 2 Northridge with our current payout capacity. And San Francisco, we could even do again. Now, why is that? Because fewer than 10% of Californians are insured. And so the numbers are very small. But tremendous payout capacity, and with that financial capacity is this charge to sponsor mitigation. So the Northridge earthquake highlighted that there was a tremendous amount of damage in these wood frame buildings. And I think, after watching this morning, we forget 80 some odd % of the buildings in California are wood framed. The majority of our residential construction is wood framed. We have a moderate climate, access to timber. That is the structures are all made out of wood. Predominantly afford their occupants life safety. And so in terms of structural triage, in terms of what we've been looking at that's important when you start with life safety, wood frame buildings were going to be at the kind of the bottom of the list. Along comes the Northridge earthquake, and the amount of damage was so significant that people realized something needed to be done to study these buildings and to essentially impose very sophisticated structural engineering on an unengineered structure. And so along came a really amazing project that I know Kelly worked on. The Curie Caltech Wood Frame Project was funded by FEMA and managed by Curie. And these amazing names. Up here we had 2 people from this original project team that have served on some of our other projects. Really kind of started up the conversation about how you identify and reduce damage to these not just single family, but we'll say wood frame structures, right? It was more general than single family. The Northridge earthquake also highlighted the need for earthquake damage assessment tools for single family. There's this amazing kind of confluence of engineering that goes on after an event, where there's these very sophisticated larger firms that have been able to send their engineers to do forensic engineering after an event, and then these kind of smaller engineering firms, many of them just one person working out of their home, that do wood frame single family dwellings that have never done any forensic engineering. And somewhere between those, the larger firms where no one's doing wood frame, all doing wood frame but no forensic engineering. In between that was this, well, what is a stucco wall that's damaged to the extent that it's gone into some nonlinear range? What does that look like? And these are the kinds of things that were not available. And then of course every crack in the concrete in Los Angeles was due to the earthquake. So the CEA funded this Curie document, the General Guidelines for the Assessment and Repair of Wood Frame Buildings. It's now used as the basis for earthquake claims adjustment. Dr. John Oscars from Exponent led that. So also bold steps to increase our mitigation our program came when our CEO joined the CEA, Glenn Pomeroy. Adoption of retrofit standards, believe it or not, first time we adopted a code standard into the code for single-family dwellings was in 2010, Chapter A3. Leadership, they actually had to pass legislation to create my job because we're, as I said, managed publicly. Retrofit incentives, we started the California Residential Mitigation Program and the Earthquake Brace Bolt Program. And then funding research. What are those gaps that we needed to fill? And we identified those, and 2 of those projects you'll hear about in a second. EBB, Earthquake Brace Bolt, I just want to leave this with you. If you live in California, you may have heard of it. We provide up to $3,000 to retrofit homes, cripple wall homes. They need bolts, they need plywood in the crawl space. We've done over 7,000 of them. We figure there are 1 million to do, so a little drop in the bucket there. So the 2 projects you're going to hear about. We knew that we had Chapter A3 for cripple walls, but we knew there were gaps. The most important thing is to provide as much pre-engineering as you possibly can for single-family dwellings. Prescriptive plan sets that can be used by contractors without an engineer, design methodology for these, kind of 1- and 2-person small firms. And then once you do retrofit that house, what is the savings in damage? Because one of the things as an insurance company that we can do to provide incentives is provide a meaningful discount if you've retrofitted your homes. So you're going to hear about these 2 amazing projects from Kelly Cobean, a structural engineer who, as I said, was back on the Curie project, who's going to talk about this ATC 110 FEMA P1100 project, and then Dr. David Welsh, who's worked on that. Actually, they're both working on both of these projects, but they've split them up, and you'll see this wonderful transition between the 2 projects. So now I'd like to introduce Kelly Cobean, wood expert extraordinaire. Really delighted to have her working on both projects. Kelly?